Hello and welcome to Season 14, Episode 10 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I am Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading Russell Kirk's The Conservative Mind, this time talking about conservatism frustrated America from 1865 to 1918. Kind of an interesting chapter. A couple of these people, again, I really wasn't sure why they were included in this history of conservatism. The two last guys, especially Henry Adams and Brooks Adams. I got a little bit more out of James Russell Lowell and E.L. Godkin for their thoughts on democracy in the press and stuff like that. But those other two, I really wasn't sure about where they fit into sort of the history of the conservative school of thought. I don't know. What do you think?
I would agree.
Hmm.
I think he probably could have just skipped this era.
Yeah.
Tell us that the people that would be considered his favorite or most prominent conservative writers or thinkers weren't actually conservative during this
Hmm.
period. It's like, wait a second, why even address that, especially over many pages? But
Yeah.
well written, is interesting read.
Hmm.
I wasn't really familiar with these guys. I mean, I knew of, heard of the Adamses, but
Hmm.
I don't think I read any of their stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of an interesting discussion of that period of time, 1865 to 1918, which is a really wild time in American history. I mean, a lot of changes,
Hmm.
from war all the way to end of World War One. I mean,
Right.
it's almost impossible to even understand how much change had taken
Hmm.
place.
And it's all easily within one lifetime, right? You can be
Yeah.
born and witness the Civil War and die having seen World War One. Pretty crazy time in American history.
Well, and I'm kind of thinking, other than like huge wars, I mean, my lifetime has been pretty crazy, and yours is probably going to be even crazier.
Yeah, probably.
As we go forward. I hope it's not any crazier, but I mean, just think about all the changes. It's now a pastime for people my age, like in mid 50s, to talk about how much the world has changed since we were
Yeah.
kids, and Gen X, as they called us. I don't think we never really accepted Gen X as a
Hmm.
term. The boomers just thrust it upon us, bastards. And then we're just like, oh, I guess we're Gen X,
Hmm.
because we just took everything, which is what Gen X does.
Yes, the worst generation.
The worst generation or the boomers?
The
Yeah.
boomers, yes.
And I am personally insulted if somebody says boomer to me.
Hmm.
F you. Those are fighting words. 10 years older than me.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But yeah, anyway, I
Yeah.
won't go down that path. But
No, that's right.
it's yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know. I was reading this, I'm thinking, yeah, we're gonna have another episode where we're like, yeah, these guys are kind of interesting.
Hmm.
I don't really need to talk about them too much.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, that's a good introduction to
Yes, thank you.
our listeners. Very excited and interested.
Yeah.
There was one thing. Oh, there was some stuff towards. There's some stuff about women's that I was going to get to. I got that
Oh,
somewhere.
good.
Well,
That should
it's
be
in the read.
great.
It's in the read.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
yeah.
yes.
I'm not just,
Um,
I'm not just trying to force it in
hmm. Hmm.
into the conversation.
Yes. I do like how he says, sort of in this beginning, before we get to James Russell Lowell,
Yeah.
where he says, on 295, says, the New England reformers thought they had struck down evil incarnate when they crushed the sable genius of the South, and their horror at the corruption and chaos of the Gilded Age was intensified proportionately as they discovered the extent of their own previous naivete.
Mhm.
Right, so this discussion of like, well, what actually is sort of the biggest threat to American society, right? And you have sort of a clear objective in the Civil War, right? The sort of evil of slavery and things like that. And as long as we get past that, right, everything will be fine and unity and everything like that. And then all of a sudden you have this Gilded Age, this corruption, this chaos. He kind of refers to sort of like the boss politics, right, in the Northeast and Chicago and things like that. Just how politics is changing so rapidly in that time as you're moving out of the more agrarian societies. Everything's industrializing sort of at lightning speed. It's like, hang on, we have to figure out what we're actually trying to conserve here, right? What actually is America in this time where so much is changing in this, roughly 50-year period.
Yeah, and I mean, and he mentions, which I think is an interesting focus, the consolidation of government. The
Hmm.
powers within a central government, And then he mentions, without getting too in detail, the federal income tax, which was in this period of time as well. But I like when he talks about, greater democracy and populism.
Hmm.
And I like this little statement. He says, if government is corrupt, why you make it wholly popular? It's like, and that's a good question. Just making it more democratic doesn't make it less corrupt. And of course, this is the era of the union bosses, or not even
Hmm.
bosses, the political bosses, sometimes tied up with the unions, but um, in the patronage system,
Right.
and before the civil service reform, which has its own problems. Because I'm like, gosh, I almost would rather have patronage now.
Yeah.
I mean, on the federal system, it's like you have patronage. It's just one party patronage, and it's permanent. You
Yeah.
know, it's like it takes forever to get the Democrats out and the Republicans in,
Hmm.
and then anyway. So we'll see how successful Trump ends up being in his second term. He's been trying to do a lot of things as far as substituting people, but a civil service doesn't work if it's just one-sided,
Hmm.
and it's gonna end up destroying itself because of that, because it
Yeah.
becomes so partisan, one-sided, and so corrupt. But this was back in the Tammany Hall days, where you had to be part of the political machine to get a job with the government, certainly, but
Hmm.
also to get services. Like my parents, who were born in the 1920s, when they were a young couple, when I was born, and before that, for many years they lived in Chicago.
Hmm.
And Chicago was, one party town, and it was you had a ward boss, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
talk about it, and they talk about it with some affection. But yeah, and somehow they would, I mean, I don't know if anybody could vote Republican. I mean, like physically, but like if you did, they would find out, and like
Hmm.
you wouldn't get trash service if you didn't
Yeah.
vote for the preferred candidate. I mean, and I don't know about police service, such as it was, but it's that is an all-encompassing thing. So that's not ideal either, of course, because it's taxpayer money, and services should be provided to everybody. But he's talking. He doesn't really talk about that in too much
Hmm.
detail. He's talking about the centralization of power in the government, and how that's a problem. Then he even mentions about the gradual popularization of Darwinism and the
Yeah.
scientific theory of government and society, and how that's really had a degenerative effect on culture and on society, and traditions
Hmm.
within the United States, and
Yeah.
conservative thought.
Yeah, I like what he says. Just after that, and then just before we get into James Russell Lowell, he says American character, individualistic, covetous, contemptuous of restraint, always had been stubborn clay for the keepers of tradition to mold into civilization. Now it threatened to become nearly anarchic, to slip into a ditch of spiritual atomism. Right. So whatever like good elements of individualism are slipping into a very dangerous, like very fractured society, sort of just interested in these very scientific, sort of pragmatic ideas in some ways. And so, well, what are we actually conserving here? What actually is the nation? And these four thinkers seems like, at least in the way he presents it, are trying to wrestle with this question. I don't know about how successfully, especially the two Adamses at the end.
Right.
I did enjoy some of the discussion of James Russell Lowell here,
Yeah.
as he says, right, he's this American school of literary criticism, a poet of high, if limited talent. He best exemplifies the frustration of conservatism in his age, in doubt about democracy, in doubt about industrialism, in doubt about the future of the American people. Right, so not really putting forward like a very positive, right, conservative philosophy, but sort of pointing out the problems with what sort of this age is leading to, very much in doubt about sort of the future of the country, and how we can conserve anything that was the same prior to this period.
Yes. And then any good conservative thinker has to have a negative view of the French Revolution.
Hmm.
And in that respect, he is no exception. I love this quote on 199. He says, among the lessons taught by the French Revolution, there is none sadder or more striking than this, that you may make everything else out of the passions of men except for a political system that will work. I just thought it was great. And then it continues on, but
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah, he obviously was this particular person of the four that are discussed in this chapter seemed the most compelling to me as a at least a conservative thinker and writer and can turn a phrase, which I'm always a fan of, as long as I can understand it.
Mhm.
But other than, and I guess the other thing that he mentions is kind of a criticism of originality
Mm.
and infatuation with novelty and intellectual experiment, and it became more and more repugnant to him. And I've come along. I mean, maybe it's just an old man's condition, but I used to think, oh, these new ideas are so great, and knew this and knew that, and I remember when I was like your age, oh, I think I want to read about Buddhism and Hinduism. Oh, that's neat. It's so, and I want to be original. And now I'm like, maybe this stuff's just wrong. It's
Yeah.
like maybe all this original thought is just originally wrong. I mean, like it's just because it's a fad or it's shiny or whatever. And I did read a little bit about Buddhism, but
Mhm.
it's so amorphous. It's just like, God, this is. I was kind of frustrated with Western philosophy because I'm like, well, nobody knows anything, and I went to that rabbit hole of determinism and all that
Mhm.
stuff. You get to the end of the line of Western philosophical thought, but then you go to Buddhism or Hinduism. First of all, Hinduism is kind of goofy. But sorry to all our Hindu listeners, but
There's many, I'm sure.
but there's like it's like a more complex and less logical system of Greek gods,
Yeah.
a lot of it. But the Buddhism is just it was even less meaningful to me than, and of course not logical, but the Buddhist would say, oh, the logic is illogical. Illogical is logical. And sit in a room and think about it and go, and then you'll be inspired. I don't know. I don't know why I went down that path. Oh yeah. So like I like that he has a sensibility of, that as all good conservative thinkers, mature conservative thinkers are come to the realization that
Mhm.
tradition is there for a reason. It became a tradition because it had truth
Yeah.
in many circumstances, not
Mhm.
with every principle of, or every practice.
Mhm.
But the major ones, there's a reason why there's not been a tremendous amount of beneficial new philosophical thought. It's
Yeah.
really going back to the accepted practices of old
Right.
that are really reliable.
Mhm. Yeah, I like what he says on that point. This quote on page 301. He says, "One of the strongest cements of society is the conviction that the state of things into which they are born is a part of the order of the universe, as natural, let us say, as that the sun should go round the earth. It is a conviction that they will not surrender except on compulsion, and a wise society should look to it that this compulsion is not put upon them. For the individual man, there is no radical cure outside of human nature itself for the evils to which human nature is heir." And I thought that was just really great, right? That in order to have a society, you have to make sure that the sort of natural inclination to like just keep things generally the same, right? And like kind of as you mentioned, right? There's I think this impulse, when you're young, to go out and try and make everything original and make everything new. But sort of as things settle down, it's realizing that there is some really good things about the way that things have developed. That we shouldn't just sort of upturn our entire lives in the hope of some new original idea, especially some new original political philosophy. In fact, like the political ideas that we have largely developed as the result of 2,000 years of this culture existing here and things like that. And it's like, well, we should make sure that we are not compelling people to give up the way that things sort of naturally are. And when that compulsion happens, like in the French Revolution and things like that, then that's when things really start to go really off the rails.
Yes. And as an aside, I just finally finished Marcus Aurelius's Meditations,
Wow.
which is a surprisingly short book. I got embarrassed to be so long ago. I finally read it.
Yeah, it's not that long.
It's really not that long of a book. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You've read it, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a while. It's been a while.
I mean, that whole Stoic philosophy, it's a little dark,
Hmm.
because it's just like grin and bear it and
Hmm.
do what you can and what you're made to do. And then, we'll all be dead soon. So don't worry about what people think of you because they're going to be dead soon too.
Right.
And even the people that knew them and remember them, they'll be dead before you know it. And then what's it all for?
Yeah.
No, don't worry about it. Just do what is right. It's actually pretty. I really like the Stoics. Do you like the Stoics?
All right. All right. They're probably one of the better ones out of the ancient sort of philosophical schools. They're definitely the one of the least prone to sort of upturn all of society and just
Yes,
pursue
yeah,
the wrong things. They
for
don't
sure.
necessarily pursue the right things, but they're not going to be driven to pursue the wrong things as much as sort of the Epicureans and things like that.
Yeah, they're not like the philosophy is not like, oh, we have to uh, take up arms to defend the innocent or the
Yeah.
or the weak.
Hmm.
Like a slave, you were made to be a slave.
Hmm.
Do your best job as a slave and enjoy as much as you can being a slave.
Right.
Slaves. There's no revolutionary thought in the Stoic philosophy.
Yeah. This is
Fulfill your role
yeah.
as the gods have allotted
Mhm.
to you.
This is kind of an aside. Have I told you about the self-described Epicurean that I met a couple weeks ago? Who's like a professor,
Oh,
who is on
of
campus.
course.
Yes, he's on campus speaking for a conference. And I won't say the guy's name. This is really interesting character. But he was invited to this philosophy conference on the thought of David Hume. That I was going to some of the sessions there on, and evidently Hume had this four-part sort of four essay thing that was sort of talking about the four major schools of ancient philosophy and sort of dialogues with all of them. And this guy was talking about the Epicurean school of thought, and I was invited to help with the dinner afterwards to ferry people from the campus to where the dinner was, and I was sitting across from this guy, and he ordered so many drinks
Ah,
at this dinner. It was really kind of impressive because every single time, I had people to right and left, and I was talking to them on this, and every time I looked up and looked at him, he was either finishing a drink or ordering another drink, and he
like an
must have had.
alcoholic drink
Yes,
or
oh yes, yes, yeah, of course. Well, he's an Epicurean,
right.
and so he was, obviously, drinking plenty. And then towards the end of it, everybody else, he's middle aged, almost everybody else, there were a couple middle aged, maybe late 30s professors there. A lot of them were like late 60s into their 70s professors. And so at the end of the dinner, he's looking around down the table. Who wants to go to karaoke? I
Ah,
gotta go to karaoke right now. Those guys over there, they'll go to karaoke, and I'm like, I really don't think they will. And so I had to drive him, and then a professor who was originally from England, I forget where he was at. I had to drive them to their hotel afterwards.
yeah.
And he kept saying to me, he's like, "Oh, where are the best karaoke places? We got to go to karaoke." And I'm like, "I think I'm just taking you to your hotel." And he started telling this crazy story about how he was in England, in London. He's like, all the pubs were closing at like 6 p.m. And the guy in
Oh,
my back seat was like, "Where were you in London that they were closing at 6 p.m.?" And
yeah,
my pet theory
the
is that
Muslim quarter.
yeah. Well, my theory was he was just so belligerently drunk that he was getting kicked out of all the pubs and he thought that they were closing. But on the way back, he was telling me all about he's an Epicurean and he lives out this Epicurean philosophy. And I'm like, yeah, I can tell. That's
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 great.
something. Yeah, he was one of the most entertaining characters I think I've ever met at a conference like that.
Well, he may have inverted the AM and PM. Yeah, he may have been drinking until 6 a.m. Like, "What, are you closing at 6? But yeah, it's still a light out. No, that's the sunrise, you freak. What? Oh, hey, Precarian.
No, he
Yeah,
was
karaoke was originally Japanese. That's great.
oh, it was really, really funny. Had
I'm a
a
little,
wife and kids too,
I'm
and
a
I guess
little
this is just what he
disappointed.
does. Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed that you didn't get some guys to go to the karaoke with them.
There was
I have to say, I'm a little disappointed that you didn't round up some dudes and say, "Hey, I got a live Epicurean here, and he wants to go karaoke." Let's
the
go.
thought did cross my mind, but it was a 2 day thing. So I was at helping with the dinner at the first night, and then one of my friends was helping the second night, and he had to take them back. And he ended up did going out and getting
Oh,
drinks with
really?
this guy and the other British guy. And
Yeah.
he's telling me they went to just like the undergrad bars that are just like
Yeah.
just north of campus, and so they just all stuck out like a sore thumb. And he just
Right.
kept
Right.
ordering drinks at this undergrad bar, kept trying to talk to people, just
Right.
random people about like philosophy and stuff. And it's just like. Oh man, he was a character. He was a character.
Yeah, good. Good.
Yeah.
That's a nice change. Got to make sure he gets invited back next year.
Yes, yes. But yeah, back to James Russell Lowell. I really
Oh
don't
no,
have too
we're
much
wait.
else to say about him. Some pretty sharp critiques of democracy. Yeah, he says democracy in its best sense is merely the letting in of air and light. He once remarked in a similar vein, habitual comfort is the main fortress of conservatism and respectability, two old-fashioned qualities for which all the finest sentiments in the world are but a windy substitute. It's really just saying, right, the solidity, sort of the average, just staying sort of same in society is really what we should be appealing to, not going with whatever sort of newfangled change is happening at any moment. But he doesn't really put forward any positive idea for how to actually accomplish this. He's more so just complaining about the state of the world, which fair enough, but not the most interesting of political philosophers.
Yeah, it ends up being like an angry man yelling at the clouds,
Yeah, exactly.
like me. Silent as to the means of how you affect change,
Right,
according to.
right, right.
So the next one is Edwin Lawrence Godkin. I don't know.
Yes.
I never even heard of this guy
No,
before.
never heard of him. Very interesting though, and I think very relevant today because his big sort of idea was a critique of the popular press.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
yeah, and he says that sort of at this beginning block quote on 303, he says, "The rise of the newspaper press, furnishing to every man the materials for an opinion of some sort about public affairs, and the opportunity to say something about them, whether well or ill-judged, had naturally a paralyzing effect on aristocratic policy, and would have led to the downfall of aristocratic states, even if the French Revolution had never occurred. When every man in the state knew, or thought he knew, what ought to be done, the period of government by small trained minorities had passed away." It's really this critique of like the over sort of spread of news and information that now every single individual person thinks that they know every single decision that needs to be made.
Yeah.
And he says that's really a dangerous impulse to create in society. And of course, that's only gotten worse with social media. And you think you have the whole story, you're only getting small snippets of whatever side is sort of most appealing to you often. And that is a pretty bad situation that we're in.
Yeah, and I think I'm of two minds of it. I have sympathy for this Godkin character because, of course, I think he was in the era of yellow journalism too,
Hmm.
towards the
Yeah.
end of his career. And yeah, because he mentioned it, yellow journalism, which he thought was nearest approach to hell in any Christian state. So and after yellow journalism, there was this effort to try to get objectivism into journalism and not have a partisan press and
Hmm.
manipulative press. And I think that they did a pretty decent job of it for a little while, or at least put on the airs of it. Now it's not, but and I know social media. Of course, social media is still relatively new.
Right.
I'm a little encouraged by like they call citizen journalism, which isn't great. But even like there's I won't mention the sources, but there's two local people. They have an what is it, nom de plume, I think,
Hmm.
where you write under a different name,
Yeah.
right? Isn't it? Yeah. And write about local issues. And one of
Hmm.
them was they actually got an interview with a local mayor
Hmm.
of Arnold, and there's a big controversy in the city of Arnold, and did a very good job of summarizing pretty complex issues on a local level. So I was really impressed with that. There's a couple of them that do this pretty well, better than the local newspaper.
Right.
So I think there's still some hope. Like the Barry Weiss said, the Free Press, which was kind of
Hmm.
an independent journalism outfit. So I think there's still hope for that, but you really do have to be careful and do your own uh, studying. But it's like a lot of people are like older people that we know or that we're related to, and they see these memes or whatever, these headlines on Facebook, And they jump to these conclusions, and you're like, look, I agree with you that
Hmm.
this side is right, but you have all the wrong reasons. Like, I'm on your side, but you are wrong
Right.
about why you're on my side. This is not in the Constitution, and that's not the statute. This is not what happened. So I sympathize with them, but at the same time, what else are you going to do? It's like there's no way to control this. They used to have the elites, and you had to have a printing press. So
Yeah.
that took money. But in any event, so yeah, I thought that was pretty good, just like you said.
Hmm.
And anyway, so I thought focused on those kind of things was pretty great.
Yeah. I like what he says towards the bottom of 305. He says, quite as the modern reading public suffers from an increasing incapacity for continuous attention, so the people suffer from a chronic boredom with politics, only
Yeah.
occasionally roused to action and then commonly ignorant action.
Mhm.
Where it's like, too often, when there is some sort of interest in political affairs, it's because kind of exactly what you're saying, because you have exactly the wrong reasons for it. You've been roused by this sort of not quite right news headline, and you're incensed about this. Oh, we have to do something about this, and that problem really isn't actually happening in the way that you think it is, which could be a very big problem. Then he says on 307, he says, well, what is the sort of possibility of restraining this and sort of fixing this problem?
Right.
And he says his medicine, like his diagnosis, suffers from his preoccupation with economic and political questions in their narrower sense. Like
Mhm.
nearly all his philosophical school, like Macaulay and J.S. Mill, he can escape the narrow legacy of the rationalist tradition only at rare moments. Often he seems to think of society as a machine, efficient or inefficient, which may be injured or repaired by certain technical operations. And so he
Yeah.
really thinks it's an economic problem. We solve sort of the economic problems that are going on, this labor problem. You have to make the manual laborers of the world content with their lot. Just make it so that this happens in a better way.
Yeah.
Not really addressing any of the cultural issues or the information-based issues. It's like as long as we sort of just satisfy these manual laborers with economic sort of placations, then they're fine. All of the other problems will go away, which is a very simplistic, very technical way of looking at the problem.
Yeah, and similarly, he mentions like the changes structurally that he advocates for on 308,
Hmm.
civil service reform, referendum and initiatives, constitutional conventions more frequently, and then that the overreach of the other side would lead us back somehow amorphously or
Hmm.
to a more laissez-faire idea of government. Well, I think the initiatives and referendums have been pretty much discredited at
Yeah.
this point all across the country. Now, having said that, if you want to get something done, you want to get the law changed, that's probably the most effective way to do it. You bypass the legislature by doing the initiative or the referendum, but it causes all sorts of other problems too. Like, we have marijuana in the Missouri Constitution now.
Hmm.
It's like, do we really need that? And then, I guess we're going to have another ballot initiative with regard to abortion
Yeah.
in Missouri. I don't know if we need that as an initiative.
Definitely not.
Um, either side of it.
Hmm.
We don't have an initiative or referendum on whether or not you're going to have robbery be criminalized. I mean, it really is a
Yeah.
criminal statute, and it should be debated and passed, and period.
Yeah.
But whatever, or not passed, or decriminalized, or
Yeah.
whatever, however we're going to do it.
It,
So his remedies, were again like mechanical. Oh, if
mhm.
we just change some of these structures, and I am in favor of an occasional constitutional convention, but of course that opens up the can of worms,
Mhm.
or the Pandora's box, or the Jack in the Box,
Mhm.
or the snake. Like those cans that you open up and the
Yeah,
snake
yeah,
comes
yeah.
out
There
at
you
you.
go.
That's better analogy.
Yes, that's great. Yeah.
But we need one in Missouri, the local
Mhm.
level, and we need to amend the Constitution at the federal level on a couple of
Yeah.
things. Once you
Yeah.
start going on that path, it's like, wait a second, I don't want to change it that way.
Yeah. His last solution that he mentions there, the failure by governments in their management of the economy would provoke a restoration of laissez-faire. That reminds me a little bit of sort of like the super online like far right groups like the Nick Fuentes and stuff, if you've heard of him. Um, like their idea is, well, we have to the people in charge now aren't really conservative. We have to let the far left win so that it provokes like a return to like an even farther right guy, where it's like, yeah, if we let them win and show off just how bad their policies are, we'll get a better guy in charge on our side. It's like the you have to lose to win idea, which is really not great because there's never any guarantee that then once the far left's in power that they won't just do everything in their power to make sure that nobody conservative at all will be able to run and make changes and things like that. And of course, a lot of those guys, they kind of just want like a new Hitler sometimes, almost professedly so. It's like, okay, that's just ridiculous. But there's this weird impulse, I think, sometimes on the right, and you don't have to go that far right to see it. But it's like, yeah, if we just get enough of the left wing to show their true stripes, then we can get a real conservative in charge. And there might be some truth to that, but I think it's opening it up way too much just for 1,000 more problems to happen.
Yeah, because the answer always is, well, that wasn't the real communism.
Yeah.
We have to do more
Hmm.
because you limit it. Kind of like, well, like Obamacare didn't work because you didn't let us do it as way we wanted to do it. We wanted
Hmm.
to do more, or so and Nick, I've went to. I don't even. I mean, I've seen the guy like in 10-second little clips,
Yeah.
but I don't know enough about him other than my prediction is that he was on the SPLC payroll. That's my prediction. That he's one of those people that that they were funding so that they could fundraise off of how awful people can be.
Hmm.
And it's a brilliant strategy. The return on investment that they had, and I've known that they were a corrupt organization for many, many years, and they almost imploded. Was it during Trump's first term? Financial
Hmm.
irregularities, a bunch of finger pointing, and they almost completely collapsed. But they were bringing in so much money.
Yeah.
I think among the group of them, they just figured, oh, let's just bury the hatchet in each other's backs, and then we'll keep splitting the cash
Right.
because millions and millions. And they've been horrible people for decades.
Hmm.
And it's been an open. It's not even a secret. But then they were, the FBI was working with them. Of course, Facebook and Twitter famously were saying, well, the SPLC said you're a hate group, so now you're banned from social media. So, oh man,
Hmm.
so it would not surprise me if somebody like Fuentes or any of these other people were not on the payroll. It would make sense for the SPLC to support these guys and get them enough funding so they can get their message out, so that they can point to them, hey, look over there, this guy's terrible. We need to fight him. Give us some money so we can fight him.
Yeah. And it
You
does almost seem like too obvious of a solution. But like you can just like make positive change in your local community. Right? I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of these guys in the same problem with Godkin here that we have to have these sweeping sort of, national changes and force everything back, economically. And if we change this big thing, then it'll work its way back. But really, I think like if you do want to make change happen and return to sort of a better state of things, well, then look at like your local town where you're at, and you can really affect change there. Right? You might not be able to change the whole state and definitely not the whole country by yourself, but you can make things happen and make things certainly more conservative in your local town.
yep,
But they just completely ignore that side of things. Oh no, we have to let the far left in charge so we can get the far right dictator back, and or we have to let the economy crumble so we can get the laissez-faire economy back on track. And it's like, well, we can't just expect it to go to this extreme and then balance right back out afterwards. That's not how things work.
yeah. Well, it's similar to like Jordan Peterson's advice. Take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
And if you're okay, and then your family, you need to go, and then your job, and then maybe your community, and then maybe beyond that, and then you build on that from the small to the large. But anybody can pontificate about the Ukraine war.
Hmm.
How about you get on the school board and evaluate the curriculum? I
Hmm.
mean, like the devils and or how about whether or not to seek a bond increase for new roads or sewers? I mean, that's important work. It's not easy work, but we need elected officials to weigh that
Right.
and whether or not we want to do those projects. And if you're not willing to do that, or if you haven't done it, my favorite uh, question to determine if a politician is competent.
Hmm.
Nobody asked this, but uh, where you live, where does your water come from? Like
Hmm.
literally, where's the water treatment plant? Where's it located? And if they don't know, then f them. Because they are competent
Right.
on a state or local level. Because if you don't know that, you're not paying attention. And now, of course, 90% of the people don't know where the water treatment plant is for their own town. Well, depending on the town, I mean, how prominent it is or whatever, but and how small it is, because if you're smaller in the town, you're going to notice, oh, that's the big water plant. But that question is an example of focusing on, the practical and making a difference locally, and then building competence to go on even further. If you can't do that, then it's like, oh well, I think we should go to war with Iran. Do you really know? Like I haven't commented on the Iran thing because I don't know
Yeah.
what the heck's going on there, and I'm
Right.
reasonably well informed. In fact, I haven't even talked about the Ukraine war. It's been going on
Yeah.
for generally.
Hmm.
I haven't commented on it even among friends or anything because it's like I'm not an expert on it, and I'm waiting to see how it shakes out. In
Yeah.
a lot of respects, and people would say, "Oh, you should support Ukraine because it's a tyrant," and they put a Ukraine flag in their window. I'm like, what is that doing?
Yeah.
You know, the Ukrainians don't see it, and the Russians don't see it. There's a store in Festus Main Street that has had a Ukraine flag in its window for
Hmm.
years. I'm like,
Yeah.
why is that?
Well, it's a religious ritual. You have to signal
Yeah,
your support for whatever the religious sort of cause is, and that is one of them, among many others that they hang up random flags for.
it's strange.
Um,
Anyway, I got
but yes,
completely
no, that's
sidetracked
right.
on that.
I think that kind of ties in, unless you have anything else to say about
Nope.
Godkins here, about sort of the education of people, because
Yeah.
Russell Kirk's remarks about Henry Adams, he starts out with, he's like one of the most well-educated Americans to have ever lived, knew the history of medieval Europe as well as he knew the administration of
Yeah.
Jefferson, understood Japan and the South Seas as he understood New England character, et cetera, et cetera. He goes on and on about how well educated he is. But this sort of just led him to like a deep pessimism about
Yeah.
everything, right? He had all of these gifts, this very well educated person, this very great critic of ideas, and it just led him to be very frustrated with everything all of the time, which, I mean, kind of fair, granted, sort of the period of time that he's living in. But again, it's sort of the problem with all of these guys, this frustrated conservatism, when if they're even making any proposals at all for positive change, they're not great, but oftentimes it's just, sort of angry man yelling at clouds.
Yeah, in his defense, in this era, there was so much corruption.
Yeah.
Like they're talking about General Grant, who was, a great leader during the Civil War, became president, and corruption just not his personal corruption, but the corruption of everybody in his cabinet was
Hmm.
notorious. And there was a succession of scandals and corruption and job seekers and payola and all that stuff and this for a couple decades. So I could see how you'd be dispirited. You're in this great constitutional republic. You're educated. He's involved in government as an ambassador or
Hmm.
representative in Spain and England, I think. And it's got to be, make you cynical.
Right.
Uh, after all that, it's like, oh my gosh, can we ever get past this? Is it in the nature of a democracy that there's corruption?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
you know,
interestingly, yeah, he kind of says like he gets some of his ideas from Marx, where he says, "I think I
yeah,
never struck a book which taught me so much and with which I disagreed so radically in conclusion." But it seems like a lot of his ideas are very similar. He says, like on page 313, right, that this is just sort of an economic change, and everything's just going to kind of crumble. It's just the degrading cycle. It says modern politics is at bottom a struggle not of men but of forces. The conflict is no longer between the men but between the motors that drive the men, and the men tend to succumb to their own motive forces. And
yeah,
that's pretty close to
yeah,
Marx's theory of sort of these economic cycles and stuff like that, sort of the progress of civilization. His is just a little bit more of a pessimistic look,
yeah,
that it is
yeah,
going to crumble, but we're not going to get this communist revolution, this sort of glorious revolution out of it. It's just going to fall apart, but it is predominantly economic forces that are sort of driving history, which is kind of, again, I can kind of see how he gets to this conclusion, but clearly is not the right conclusion to come to.
yeah, and even thinks that socialism is inevitable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In
Like
the same way
family.
that Marx does.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's going to triumph over capitalism because it's cheaper and modern life always rewards cheapness.
Mhm.
And now in that sense, we have a much more socialist country than we did back then, as far
Mhm.
as government funding for a lot of things. And so he does describe, what the people want pretty accurately and going into the future.
Right.
But he's talking about, the degradation of society and
Mhm.
and how socialism is going to take over and it's all these forces outside of your own individual will,
Yeah.
almost like the
Yeah.
that whole Marxist philosophy of the class or group struggles, and he just throws up his hands.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty much exactly what Kirk says about it on
yeah,
315. He says the process of degradation is now too far advanced for any exertion of will to hamper its course. There's nothing
yeah,
we can do. Everything's just going to fall apart,
yeah.
and these economic forces are going to ruin everything.
Well, also
Uh,
that he doesn't, he gave up the belief in any sort of providence.
yeah,
That there's any sort of guiding force for good. Like God's plan or anything like that. It's like, oh, I guess we're just at the mercy of chance or determination, I guess. Because the study of history and all that just has to be quote unquote scientific, as opposed to, a struggle between good and evil, or good and not good, or less
mhm.
good.
It is interesting how he touches on sort of like technological development, sort of on 317, where
Yeah.
he says like we're just continuously like speeding up the rate of change in technology. He says the mechanical phase began in 1600, which its highest authority about 1870. Then it became the electric phase, which was continued through 1900, and that'll endure until 1917 when it will pass into the ethereal phase.
Mhm.
Whatever he means about these ideas. But I think he is hitting on something kind of true, and he would have been witnessing it happen, kind of as we were talking about, just the rate of technological change. That not too long ago you didn't really have electricity, right? We were working with sort of mechanical, steam engines and things like that, and all of a sudden now we have electricity, and that sweeps across the entire nation. And
Yes.
it's not too ridiculous to suppose, another 15 years after sort of electricity comes about, we're going to find a new form of energy, and that's going to sweep across the nation. And he wasn't quite right about that, but I think he is generally right about this rate of technology. And if he could have like imagined the internet, that would have probably driven him just absolutely insane. But I think he is hitting something there, that just with how much things are changing, over the late 19th into the 20th century, that there is reason to sort of be afraid for what the future sort of technology means.
Yeah. Yeah. It still astounds me that in my pocket I have a device that has all the world's knowledge, essentially. I have access
Yeah.
to all the world's knowledge, especially now with the AI stuff. There's not a question I can ask Grok
Hmm.
XAI
Hmm.
that it doesn't know,
Hmm.
or have some knowledge of or summary of. But what am I using it for? Oh, I want to see another funny video. Oh, this is video. See this guy, he fell. Look at that guy fell. He hit his head. Oh, that guy stepped on something and hit him in his balls. That's like what we use our phones
Yeah,
for.
that's true. That's true. Yes. Well, I don't have too much else to say about Henry Adams here. Should we
No.
move on to the last figure?
Let's look onto the parallel of Marx, Brooks Adams.
Brooks. Yes, yes.
Because this is
Uh,
what the author says, his ideas ran parallel with Marx.
yeah,
Isn't he the next one? He's the next
yeah,
one.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I like how he starts this section because this dude was really confusing. I mean, even sort of worse than his brother. He says Brooks Adams confessed himself to be an eccentric, and so he was, but he
yeah.
belonged to the grand tradition of eccentricity and published his novel and gloomy doctrines with the old Adams fearlessness. He says it's debatable about whether he can actually be called a conservative.
Yeah.
But yeah, very similar thoughts to his brother Henry, but a little bit of a different way. But it's just so interesting to see like how all of his ideas like come into conflict with each other. He
Yes.
says on 320, he says his detestation of capitalism resulted from his abhorrence of turbulent competition. He seems to have been desperately hungry for stability and order, but by the logic of his own economic and historical theories, permanence never is found in this universe. Right? He has
Yeah.
this whole theory of sort of historical change, everything is moving towards progress, and so he's sort of critiquing, right, sort of society developing and changing around him, but he provides like no actual thought on what it would mean for society to have order or to stay the same, because he says
Right.
history changes in this progressive way. There's nothing we can do. But he's
Yeah.
also saying, well, it's terrible that this is happening.
Yeah.
We need to stop this change. It's
Yeah.
impossible. It's a
Yeah.
very strange position to hold.
Yeah. It's further than that because he says we should submit to it. We shouldn't fight
Yeah.
it. But
And he's fighting it.
he's fighting.
Yeah.
It's like it's not only is it inevitable, but you shouldn't fight it. And you not only can you not fight it, but you should even try. But then he does.
Hmm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I got to that point, I'm like, all right, well, I guess
Yeah.
I'll learn a little bit more about this guy and then I'll be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he
I have
says,
standards.
yeah, he has almost sort of a libertarian like economic view.
Yeah.
where he says, like, cheapness of production and distribution is the source of success in economic life, sort of lowering prices, making things more available, and therefore in civilization, right? If you sort of make things cheaper and distribute them easier, then civilization progresses. But then he says the immediate consequence of competition and centralization is success. Its ultimate effect is degradation. So, on
Yeah.
one hand, he's kind of praising these things, that this is the measure of success in civilization, right? These are successful civilizations, and their success leads them to ultimate failure. And so, it's this weird combination, this weird paradox that he puts forward, right? And he says that democracy proves unable to fulfill the duties of sacrifice and leadership, so the structure of social organization collapses, and the dreary cycle of endeavor commences afresh. So he says, with this material progression, right, you end up with democracy and things like that. And that just furthers the process along, and we're degrading still. And so there's never any stopping point. There's never anything that he really wants society to be, it seems. He's just kind of continuously complaining while also praising sort of the rate of change.
Yes. The only thing I thought was kind of interesting is that I wondered if his theories about the economic center of the Western world
Mm.
shifting over time from Babylon to Rome, Rome to Constantinople to Venice to Antwerp, and I was thinking that's like what Percy Jackson said.
That is true.
That's what I was thinking. Oh yeah, because the Greek gods are like in New York
Yeah,
City,
New
or
York City, yeah.
Empire State Building or something.
Yeah.
Because
It's
the
funny.
focus of the power of the world has shifted west.
Hmm.
Um, yes. So anyway, that's the only really interesting thought I had for the rest of this reading
Hmm.
with Percy Jackson,
Yeah.
which was an excellent book series, I
Hmm.
thought.
Yes, it was very good. I remember reading those way back when.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I don't have too much else to say. Pretty much the rest of the chapter is him just complaining about sort of the modern state of the world, and everything's going to increase, and so the American Empire, and then it's all going to collapse, and the automobile is ruining everything. And it's, to some extent, like, I kind of agree with some of the things he's saying, like these little details that he's picking up with the degradation, but him fitting
Yeah.
them into this whole theory just doesn't make any sense. Very confusing character.
Yes.
And it seems like we only have sort of more of the same to look forward to. The next chapter is titled "English Conservatism Adrift: The
Yeah.
20th Century." So it seems like this is not a good time for conservatives from this late 19th into the early 20th century, with just the rate of change and how fast the world is developing with these new technologies. It's hard to see what is to conserve in society, like what is left at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to really inspirational reading the next couple episodes.
Hmm. Hmm.
But, whatever.
Yes. At least it's well written. It's well written. It's well
Well, it's
put.
easy to read. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've been really enjoying this book, even if I haven't been enjoying the thinkers that he's talking about.
Yes. Agreed.
All right. Well, do you have any other final thoughts for this episode?
No. Do you have final thoughts, or was that your last
I
final
think that was
thought?
my last thought. I think that was my final thought.
Excellent. Excellent
Yes.
final thought.
Well, there you go. Well, then this has been season 14, episode 10 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
I am still Mark Bishop.